All right, I think we're ready to get started. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here with us today. My name is Gabby Burlacu. I'm the Senior Research Manager of the Upwork Research Institute, and I'm here today to tell you that if 2025 felt chaotic or volatile, don't panic because we have your 2026 playbook right here today. I am joined by Phil Rasori, the Chief Operating Officer of Mortgage Capital Trading, and Bryan Goltzman, co-founder of Liquid Screen Design today. And what we're going to share, if we go to the next slide, is some of the research that we've conducted on the experience of being a small to mid-sized business leader and what we've learned from the SMB leaders that have really navigated the shocks of 2025 well. We're going to hear about this research, and we're also going to hear from some real-world SMB business leaders, boots on the ground, experienced 2025, some of the things that they did differently that really helped them stay on top. And here's what we're asking of you. We're asking you to be active participants, to participate in the chat, use the Q&A feature in the Zoom, share your stories, and also initially to take a quick poll. If we go to the next slide, we'll see that we want to start this webinar by really hearing from you. What are the challenges? What are the headwinds that are keeping you up at night as an SMB business leader as you think about the year ahead? Are they tariffs? Are they supply chain issues? Are they the ways that the market is shifting? What are the things that you're really concerned about staying on top of as you think about the next year? And we'll give everybody just a minute to respond. All right, are we getting some votes in? Let's see what we've got. Looks like shifting in customer preferences is a huge one that's keeping people up at night. AI adoption, AI training gaps, finding ROI from AI initiatives, that's absolutely a big one. Less concern around supply chain, which is great. Less concern around access to specialized skills, which is fantastic and not necessarily reflective of what we saw in the research, but we'll share that in a moment. All right. Well, if we head into the next slide, and actually the one after that, the main message that we want to convey today is that you are not alone. All of these are highly concerning headwinds that SMB leaders are grappling with and navigating as the macro environment around us shifts. And so one of the things that we really want to convey is that you are in good company and that we want to share what we've learned about what works with you. So how do we know what works? If we go to the next slide, we conducted research throughout 2025 where we surveyed almost 500 small to mid-sized business leaders, and we defined these as companies employing between 10 and 499 people. It's kind of a big spread, but it's really where processes start to become important, scalability starts to become important, but you may not have the unlimited resources that enterprise organizations have. And we really looked across industry and across different functional leadership roles to understand what was the experience of being an SMB leader in 2025. And here's what we learned. If we go to the next slide, we see that quarter over quarter, there were significant shifts in the SMB business leader experience, as well as in how they responded to it. So let's think back to Q1 and all of the things that were going on in Q1 in January, February, March of this year. If you felt like things were a little shaky, you were in good company. About 59% of about 59% of you were hiring for freelancers and planning to increase your hiring for freelancers. Over Q2, we found that that stayed fairly stagnant. And then in Q3, we found that more SMB leaders were looking to hire for freelancers with 68% of them. Compare this to some of the FTE hiring that was happening at that time. We found that 69% of SMB leaders in Q1 were planning to expand their hiring of full-time employees. And then as the year went on, that increased, and that was fairly high, where 3/4 of SMB leaders were planning to hire more full-time employees. Now take a look at what was going on with AI agents. As SMB leaders really thought about how work was going to happen, About 34% had planned to expand their use of AI agents in Q1, but this dropped in Q2 to 28% and came back up to about 40% of SMB leaders that said they wanted to explore AI agents in the coming year. So all of these are work models. When we think about how work is done, that shifted quite a bit throughout the year in terms of the extent to which SMB leaders plan to expand on traditional full-time employment hiring models and also leverage freelancers and AI agents. If we go to the next slide, here's what we think was behind that. We saw that a majority of SMB leaders in Q1 saw the macro environment as challenging. However, a majority also felt confident that their business could navigate these challenging times. When we look at what happened in Q2, and again, I encourage everyone on the call to think about what Q2 felt like, we see a widening gap where more SMB leaders found that Q2 was really, really challenging, but much fewer were confident that their business could navigate. What we see in Q3 is kind of a reversal of that, where again, we see greater confidence to navigate and relatively fewer SMB leaders that perceived the environment as challenging. And all the while, whether or not SMBs had the talent that they needed and those specialized skills that I mentioned in the poll was in question throughout the year. About 1 in 3 SMB leaders in Q1 felt that the talent market was scarce. This went up to 36% in Q2, but by Q3, when the headwinds had abated and there was less of a macro challenge, only 21% of SMB leaders saw the talent market as scarce. So if we go to the preceding slide, I just want to clarify the slide before and before this one. I just want to clarify that some of the talent decisions that were being made by SMB leaders were directly proportional to their perception of the macro environment. When the macro environment was perceived as more challenging and when people were less confident, they were less willing to innovate. They were less likely to use these alternative talent models, external talent pools, AI agents. But in Q3, when SMB leaders felt more confident, when the macro headwinds had abated, they were more willing to innovate. And so that suggests a couple of things to me. First is that Q3 is a bit of a success story, right? When we look in the rear view and we are now in Q4, the macro headwinds abated a bit in a way that really gave SMB leaders some breathing room, and they were able to innovate. They were free to innovate, and they were free to kind of think through the future for their company. So that's a success story. But this is also a cautionary tale because what we see is very clear behavior change based on the macro environment, which means that a lot of SMB leaders, their willingness to innovate is really determined by external forces that they're not controlling. And we prefer to be in control of how we run our businesses and how we innovate. And so that's a reason that this type of research is very important because we can learn from, if we go to the next slide, and the one following, we can learn from the leaders that never lost confidence and steadiness throughout 2025, where really the macro environment around them shifted, but they maintained a high level of confidence and innovation throughout the year. And really understanding what they did differently helps position us for 2026 as we think about how are we going to navigate continued macroeconomic headwinds. So here's what these highly confident leaders did differently. On the next slide, we found 5 key behavioral differences of this group relative to their less confident peers. First and foremost, these highly confident SMB leaders unlocked AI's value. They not only integrated AI, but they retooled their entire operating models for AI. They implemented AI broadly across both front office functions like marketing and customer engagement and back office functions like finance and operations. And they made a concerted and holistic effort to reskill their people when it comes to using AI tools. Another core thing that they did is that they experimented innovation and they embedded experimentation and innovation across the full company. It was everyone's job to experiment, to try things, and to become stronger as a result. And finally, we do see that the highly confident SMB leaders did leverage independent and freelance workers at a higher rate. But the reason that they did this was really interesting. They used this talent pool as a source of specialized skills that are otherwise difficult or expensive to attain. So they had these high level skill sets in their organizations. And so when 2025 happened and the volatility was encountered, they used these 5 levers to really do things differently and come out stronger as a result. So why do we say this matters for 2026? The reason is because we aim to make companies anti-fragile. If we go to the next slide, let's talk a little bit about what it means to be anti-fragile. Anti-fragility means you don't just survive macroeconomic shocks, you actually become more robust or stronger when exposed to stressors or uncertainty or risk. And these highly confident SMB leaders utilized those 5 levers to become more anti-fragile. When we think about what's coming next year, it's likely not going to be a calming of macroeconomic environments. We're likely going to see a lot more volatility. And so it's so important that instead of just kind of reacting to what we're experiencing, we become anti-fragile in the face of these changes. And so today I am joined by 2 SMB leaders who have done just that. And we'd love to learn from you guys. Bryan, Phil, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Gabby.
Let's jump right into it. So, my first question really, as I look at this research and I think about what it's like to be an SMB leader in 2025 and beyond, let's start by talking about AI. How have you embedded AI in your business's functioning and what changed as a result? Maybe let's start with Phil. Let's hear a little bit about how your company has embedded AI.
Well, thank you, Gabby, and hello, everyone. And really excited to be part of Upwork's webinar here. Yeah, I mean, AI has been obviously a huge part of our journey over the last couple of years. But this year in 2025. We started with pushing our client-facing chatbot and a chatbot that routes to different agents, some of our agentic functionality as well, called Atlas. For some of the OpenAI followers in the room, you'll notice that they 2 weeks ago came out with their web browser that's actually named Atlas, but I promise we were first in that naming. We That was big from a client facing standpoint, but what had a far greater effect on our productivity is when we started to look internally and move our software development team from the current IDEs that they had been using, some of the household names that for those of you in the software industry know, to an IDE, integrated development environment, called Cursor AI. And we saw literally when we measure Jira feature enhancement tickets, we saw over 100% increase in productivity when we implemented that starting in August. So that's been a huge driver for us this year.
That's fantastic, Phil. Bryan, integrating AI into your business. Tell us more.
Yeah, so my company, Liquid Screen Design, we're a promotional products company. We call it branding and swagging or physical marketing. And my guess is everybody on this call, if they look down at their desk right now, there's probably 3 to 5 items sitting on their desk with a logo on it. That's what we do. Where we kind of make the difference is on measuring that ROI. And that's part of what we did with AI this year, is trying to figure out how, when we're talking to a customer, why you're using something, and explaining to them the values, and looking at when you're buying something or you're going to give it away as a gift or a promotional item, how that impacts your brand and what you're able to accomplish. So we started looking at that with AI. And then also, like Phil, we started to look at our internal functions and trying to figure out. Last January, I set a goal for my team to take 25% of our basic function work and give it back to them as higher function time. And the first thing that we kind of looked at with that, or the first thing that I kind of tried to attempt was email, because I know we're all bombarded with emails all the time, inboxes of 200, 300 messages a day. And so we tried to decrease that amount. And I created something, but it didn't work perfectly. And then we actually found a different company that provides a solution that actually pre-drafts all the messages. It's still human in the loop. But when I get an email in, it sorts all my emails, makes sure that they're in the right categories, and then says, okay, and here's my proposed response based off of all the information, including somebody wants to set a meeting. It's checking my calendar and proposing other meetings. So that piece of automation, we call it in our office, we're calling it intelligent automation also, because we want to make sure that we're giving our staff more time to achieve the things that will help our customers the best.
Oh, I love that, Bryan. And certainly time for strategic work was important in the past year, right? So a follow-up question for you. Did everybody in your company just innately know how to use AI tools, or what was kind of the upskilling journey that you had to make sure that people were up to date on how to use these tools and how to get the most value out of them?
Yeah, well, obviously AI is moving at the speed of light, right? So like we're seeing every single day you're getting new potential applications or new potential use cases for this. For our staff, part of what's baked into our core culture is innovation. That's what we're doing when we're talking about swag also, is we're trying to innovate. So one of that pieces is we're trying new things. Now, obviously, not all AI applications are created equally. And so we have to test and then prove that what we're doing actually adds that value. So does everybody just quickly adapt to it? No. And sometimes you have to go, okay, well, we're going to test it out for a week and see where it all lays out. And other times what happens is you start working with something, you're like, oh, the uptake, like the email uptake one, is literally you sign into your email account and it starts working immediately. So it is not a hard thing to step into. But some other things like building out applications can be a much longer process. And so you got to kind of teach the value and show why it's going to work.
I love that. And the experimental nature of that is something that we'll come back to. But Phil, anything to add about upskilling for an AI world? How have you managed that at your company?
Yeah, it's interesting. Actually, just to take a step back, since Bryan mentioned swag, he does some pretty good swag. We'll be using him. Shameless plug for Bryan there. But look, it's been initially we made it optional for all of our employees, AI adoption. And we thought that initially was a good approach, because we saw that people, some individuals in our organization, it was much more conducive to their position, to the function that they had in the company. But what we very quickly saw, I would say within about 60 days, was that those that were using AI heavily in their jobs, and this goes from software development all the way into administrative functions to some of our trading staff. There began to be a larger and larger disparity of productivity. And some of the individuals that were not using AI were very valuable to our company, had been with our company for a long time. And so we mainly didn't want to get into a situation where they fell too far behind. So that's when we began making these our upskilling courses mandatory, and really formalizing our upskilling in investments and program. And I would say that actually in March of this year, that we hired the head of our which is now basically our AI department, PhD in AI engineering on Upwork, and that's been a great success. I think that, and I think we'll talk about this later, Gabby, but that's what I'm seeing is the ability to hire high quality talent for very new technologies is really valuable to us.
That's fantastic. So it sounds like you were seeing a measurable difference in the people who were using AI and really using that to catapult interest in becoming one of those highly productive individuals.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that, and there is still, we may talk about this a little bit later, but there is still a surprising amount of resistance, even on the software side. So we are. It's still a little bit of a fight. But slowly but surely, once someone sees, that the use case applies to their work function, that's when everything changes. It's night and day as far as adoption.
Fantastic. Bryan, let's go back to the experimentation that you described. One of the things that our research found was a key differentiator of highly confident, highly steady SMB leaders in the face of macroeconomic volatility was this idea of just having a culture of experimentation inherent in the company where you can try things and you can fail and you can try things again. Talk to me a little bit, Bryan, about what that looks like in your organization. And this does not have to be related just to AI.
Sure. So, like I said before, it's a core principle of our organization is to be trying new things. Everybody has foundational stories, right, as part of their business, and one of the things that we talk about often is AOL, American Online. It's one of the things that comes up over and over again as a foundational moment, as when we talk about it. And the reason why is because we talk about the CDs that they used to give out, and part of the story is that the CEO, it was 1993, they had 200,000 subscribers, and they knew that the average life expectancy of somebody was $350 working with AOL. A decade later, after doing this, at one point in the 90s, every CD made in the United States was being made as an AOL CD. There was no music CDs being made during that period of time. It's crazy, right? And what happened was within a decade they had over 25 million users. They had bought Time Warner for $180 billion, and they had what was Time Warner first came out with their first two set of movies, which was Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings. So they went from 200,000 users to owning Harry Potter and the Lord of the Rings, right, in a decade. So why do I bring that up? I bring that up because for us, I am sure when their CEO sat down with them and said, we're going to just send out hundreds of thousands of CDs, people around them probably looked and were like, that's crazy. And what we try to do is because that's a core part of our philosophy, is thinking big and giving everybody in the organization time to think about that and go, okay, so this would work on my side. Let's test it out, right? And come back and report. And so everybody on our team is constantly looking for innovation and trying to figure out ways to make our work better.
Fantastic. Phil, experimentation and innovation at Mortgage Capital Trading. What does that look like?
Yeah, I would echo, excuse me, what Bryan said. It's core to our mission, and obviously it's become more and more important as we've shifted to into this AI world where things are changing faster and faster. And so, again, it's continuing to make sure that with respect to AI, it's continuing to make sure that your teams don't give up initially. And I use the example of our marketing team. Initially there was a lot of press around some of the models, how they could create very good copy. on the marketing side, and really was not, it was not good at all initially. And then, over the last year, the writing's been better. We don't use it much, but we definitely can now use it to augment. And I think that that's a classic example. Another one, like I had said earlier, is on the software development side. There was some valid concerns when what are called context windows, when those were smaller, that tools like Cursor couldn't ingest our entire files and really couldn't get the true context to accurately make recommendations of code changes. That world's completely changed now that you see these million token context windows. And so even if initially it's not helping your job function, it's key to continue to press that. But it's always been our feeling that if you're not growing, you're not going to survive. And I think that's definitely accentuated in the last 2 years.
That is such a good point. The AI, even the same AI tool, is not one and done. The AI is evolving so much. Adoption is not a one-time occurrence. And I think that's a fantastic way to look at it. And I think very differentiated. Great. All right. So let's talk talent, right? Our organizations couldn't do what they do without the right people there. Phil, can you talk a little bit about your talent approaches in 2025? And in particular, of course, where I'm trying to angle us is the access of specialized skill sets through independent or freelance hiring pools. So can you comment on
Yeah,
that a little bit?
absolutely. Our just to give you a little bit of an overview of our kind of history with Upwork. I started using Upwork developer contractors in 2010. At the time, it was Odesk, and at that time, we were hiring some U.S. based, some overseas, mainly from a standpoint of time, where we needed to work outside of our time zone and basically follow the sun. That was kind of the use case over those first few years. As we became much larger of an organization, now if you look at where we are right now, we're about 110 U.S. based employees and only about 15 to 20 Upwork contractors. But the reason I say that is now we've transitioned, where we're looking for Upwork talent is this very specialized talent. I'll give you an example. This is one that we literally just hired 48 hours ago. Was a PhD in mathematics who, we do a lot of constrained optimization problems. And this individual had found or knew of this new technology that allows the processing of these algorithms to move from CPUs to GPUs. And for those of you in the engineering world, there is orders of magnitude more efficiency there. I don't know how we would have gotten that. We've used large consulting firms here in the United States, but I really like the ability to search, this broad range of talent, on the Upwork platform.
Absolutely. So skills that would otherwise be difficult or super expensive to attain, which is so important for small to mid-sized businesses, right? There's not limitless resources and opportunities to attract these skill sets in. So being able to do something more flexible, it sounds like, has been important. Bryan, let's talk talent. What is your organization able to do during times of macroeconomic volatility that they might otherwise not be able to do with a more rigid FTE only hiring model?
Yeah, for me, it's really hard. We talk about Upwork as freelancers, but for us, they're part of our team. We consider them full time. We give them benefits, and days off and vacation, the whole works, because they're truly integrated into our team. So we're a bit smaller than Phil. We have 30 people, and 9 of them are global talent that we've hired through Upwork. And I speak to everybody. Obviously, I don't work for Upwork, but I speak to everybody, all my business contacts, and I always am talking about the value of hiring freelancers, because why get the best person that can drive to your office when you can have the best person in the entire world doing it, doing the job? And we started working with somebody. If somebody recommended Upwork to us in early 2018, and we hired our first Upwork employee. He was a graphic designer. He still works for us today. And that's how and he's part of our team. We're a fully remote team. And so we have a digital office. It's kind of like 1980s Zelda with Zoom on top of it. So he has a desk, and if I have a question, I can walk my little avatar over to him and then ring the doorbell, which is like knocking on the door, and he comes up, and then we have a conversation. So they're fully integrated as part of our team. And as we've been growing, right now we actually have 3 jobs posted on Upwork that we're trying to fill. One of them is an AI specialist. And what we're looking at is we're still always going to be, I think for right now, human in the loop, right? As part of this, but what can we do with that human now expands with the use of AI. So we're looking for, again, like Phil said, like very specific and specialized talent. And to me, having access to that on Upwork is way easier than looking for it, in other platforms.
Fantastic. So we've heard about AI playing a role. We've heard about experimentation being critical. We've heard about independent talent being a key differentiator. Phil, did you have something you wanted to add?
I'm sorry, and not to be go out of turn here, but just to add to what Bryan was saying, if you think about a contractor versus an FTE and a new technology and how fast those technologies are changing, for me, it's a lot more comfortable to bring on a contractor knowing that there's a good potential that either this technology may not, the use case that we're trying to implement may not work, or that the technology may change. I think and in my mind, that's making it a lot harder to think down the road for FTEs on some of these brand new technologies where you're not fully confident that the use case is going to be there.
That is an excellent point. Well, I've got just one more question left for each of you, and then we're going to hear some of our audience questions. So please be thinking about what you want to ask people. My question for each of you is, what did 2025 feel like? As you look back on this year, what were some of your feelings and perceptions as a business leader? And Bryan, I'll start with you. No wrong answers here.
Yeah, I mean, for us, obviously tariffs are a big part of our business, right? So that was something that was very that we were concerned about. I think the key component for us was that our customers. So our industry is a $27 billion a year industry before you start talking about paper products like business cards and envelopes and all that stuff. And then becomes like a $400 billion a year industry, and so. One of the challenges is as prices go up and budgets go down for other business owners, right? The other people on this call, how do we provide them the same service? And where we have found that we were successful, and so we were less impacted. Our industry is down about 25%, 30%. We're up a little bit over 20%. I just looked at the numbers this morning. And so what we found is the reason why was that like our customers trusted us to provide them with solutions that worked for them. So like a good example of that is I have my notebook in front of me right now, which looks like a record. It's actually made from a record label. And like maybe this was $10 last year and this year it's $15, right? But my customer wants this. Well, they trust me to say, look, we can't do this notebook, but we can do a notebook and make it look like a record. And that still fits in your budget and it still hits the targets that you're talking about. So when I think about like the overall business landscape, I think when you're looking at yourself as a business owner, how do you make yourself anti-fragile, like we talked at the beginning? And for us, it's about trying to figure out ways that like the economy will go up, the economy will go down, but we're still an important aspect of our customers, their businesses.
I love that. You're enduring because you have good product market fit. You have something people need. Phil, let's hear from you. How did this year feel?
So for us, we're not directly affected by tariffs, but we because we are a hedge advisor and provide hedge advising software to the residential mortgage industry, we absolutely are indirectly affected, right? So when that date of April 2nd came around, in those next few weeks, that there were definitely some interesting times. We have in our industry, or frankly any kind of hedge advisor, which is there to, or hedge provider, which is there to mitigate risk. There's this interesting paradox where when things get crazy, it's scary, but you actually have more value to your customers because you're needed more versus a time when things are just kind of mundane and kind of you're at a cruising altitude and everything's good. So the year, outside of that period has been, I would say, a pretty good. I would just, again, we're in a relatively small niche of capital markets. I think for the broader audience, I would just say that, we're all going through the same things, which is that you're constantly seeing these new technologies come out, these technologies that on the frontier models, are being advertised to you that, wow, it's going to completely change your business, in the demo. And then when you see it, it's, most times, a lot of times completely worthless. And so I would say, don't give up because we've gone through a lot of demos that have been complete wastes of time. But then we have landed on some really good products, hearing about, and also I love hearing about different use cases. I have not used Bryan's email organizer, but definitely looking at doing that. But I would say, just not to give up, continuing to press forward and research all of these new technologies that are hitting the market almost on a daily basis.
Beautifully said. Those are my questions. Now we want to hear from you in the audience. What questions do you have for Bryan and Phil as you think about your own experiences and your own plans for 2026? And we'll give you a few minutes to think about those questions, get them in the Q&A, and we'll take a short break. So here is a great one, and one that I actually hear a lot when I present our research. How can I convince my leadership team that experimentation is needed versus sticking to the same old methods? And Phil, I'll start with you because you were speaking to this already so beautifully before our break.
So I had talked about earlier our broader team and how we fully feel a responsibility to train our team and and give them those skills, upskill our team. For the leadership team, it's a different story. We expect more from our leadership team. Frankly, if they're not, if they're not already innovating and looking for that frontier, we're gonna let them know that they probably shouldn't be on the leadership team. That's core, and it's always been that way for us. I would say over the last 15 years. But I know I sound like a broken record, but even more so now, I think that we can all agree on this call. And I think a lot of us, that's a lot of kind of the apprehension of all of us on this call, is that, we're all waiting for this potential new technology that will really be disruptive. Because at the end of the day, I mean, yeah, there's been a lot of changes, but there hasn't been a lot of true disruption that's, immediately permeated into the market. And so I think, again, I know I'm a broken record, but going out and continuing to research everything that you're seeing new is absolutely essential on the leadership team.
Fantastic. Bryan, you talked a little bit about your own AI tools that you use to be more productive. How important is it as a leader to be hands-on yourself versus just kind of instructing or mandating others on your team and in your organization to use AI tools?
Yeah, look, I think AI is super important. I think trying out new things as somebody who is in leadership is always really important to show that you're buying into it as well. I am fully invested in paying attention to what the newest strategies are, and also working with the staff when they bring to me something that they think is a game changer. I'm willing to dive in to also look at that. I think back to the early 90s, right? When the internet was starting. I just read an article recently, was from 1995. The internet will fade out. This is just a fad, right? And I feel like we keep hearing that with AI, right? Which we're here about the AI bubble and stuff like that. Who's going to buy things on the internet? That's just not what we're going to do. And I think part of thinking about as we talk with our teams about it, it's like, okay, well, look, it could be a fad. We could run into fads of this. I don't think that this technology is one of those fads. I think this is a transformational moment, and the people that aren't paying attention today and trying out the new things, they're going to be gone tomorrow, right? There are going to be stadiums named after the businesses that are adopting AI stuff, like there were .com stadiums in the early 2000s. And I think what we have to do as leaders is really think about, okay, where do you want your business to be? Do you want your business to be without a website in 1998, or do you want to be Amazon, selling books to college kids and having it delivered, and where Jeff Bezos is today? So to me, that's where we're at right now. It's a transformational moment for businesses, and we're a group of small business owners on this call, or business leaders on this call. And in 5 years, maybe a handful of the people on this call are not what we would consider small business owners, and they are names that are recognized in every household.
I love the prediction there. Fantastic. So this next question is actually a little bit more tactical about using Upwork and the talent that is on Upwork. And Phil, I'd love to start with you. Can we talk a little bit about how you vet talent? So the idea of like a PhD is wonderful, but what are some other considerations that you really look for to understand that somebody is going to be a good fit in your organization?
Yeah, great question. So we have a kind of a interview process. Again, for some of the new technologies, we don't necessarily have a robust testing process in that interview, but we will go through using the Upwork Zoom. We'll go through multiple meetings, and kind of give some use cases. I think that I've been very happy to see a lot of the contractors be or prospective, I should say, prospective contractors be very understanding, that we need to, before we can engage, because there's a big vetting process, obviously, on our side from an audit perspective. We've got to go through all of our internal onboarding. So there's resource we have to put on it before we actually hire the individual. So going through, specifically speaking technologies, I will say an interesting thing about education, and I'm not saying that this is going to continue into perpetuity. I'm going to say something almost controversial here, that for us, it's actually become a little bit more important because of AI, and because people have on the technical side, there's no question that there's a little bit, I would say there's been a democratization, right, of technical ability. And so you're seeing more people who can probably perform well in an interview, but not be up to the level that we would expect. And so having that there is a little bit of a checkbox there that helps. Not that it's required. We're not requiring degrees, but that is something that's become kind of come back into the mix for us a little bit especially when it's something very highly technical.
Great. Great. Anything to add, Bryan, as you think about how you vet independent talent to come work at your organization?
Yeah, for us, it is equally important that it's a cultural fit as well as a skill fit, right? So all of our staff, whether they're the freelancers that are coming on full time for us or a domestic staff member, we do a DISC assessment to see how our relationships work together once we're ready to hire them. The challenge that Phil mentions about, the democratization of the information is, yes, somebody can fool you on an interview potentially. And so we're actually in that challenge right now. We're not a software development company, but we are hiring somebody that is going to create AI applications for us that we are in the process of doing. And the question is, okay, so how do we look at the code that they're writing and know if it's AI, if we're giving them a test project, a test assessment? And we've started to bridge that gap with other tools that are out there to test their knowledge base, not just what they can get past us in an interview or in a cover letter. Because the truth is, everybody's putting their best foot forward. Even if they might not know the answer completely, they can maybe get by looking that up in real time. So, and that may not be the worst thing either, right? Just because somebody doesn't have the skill, but they know how to look up the skill, that's probably going to work for us also. So it's really a matter of how they present it. Is it, I don't know how to do this, but here's what I did, and now I know how to do it, and I can show you, and now I know how to do it for the future.
Certainly.
Gabby, if there's one thing I can just add real quick, right as I was finishing that comment, in the bottom here, there's some questions came up, and I saw one fly by on certifications. That's absolutely, I totally agree that certifications, I think, are going to become a very, well-known, robust certifications that we can verify that individual actually achieved that certification. I think is going to become a lot more important. So, and I think, well, I know more important eventually than degrees for specific technologies. So that's a very good point, whoever brought that up.
Oh, and you're getting into a great topic area as well, because some of what I'm hearing applies to freelance or independent talent, but certainly to full-time hires as well. Somebody can do well in an interview, somebody can present themselves well, and it might not be the right fit for your organization. And so let's talk a little bit about the experience of being a full-time employee right now, because when we talk about non-traditional talent models like independent talent or infusing AI to take some of that work or augment some of that work, there is a bit of a threat response, right? There is a bit of fear out there that AI is going to take jobs. And so I would love to ask you both to address that head on. And Phil, I'll start with you. What do you say about the idea that AI might be taking jobs? Like, how is it best positioned so it doesn't feel like a threat to full-time employees?
I mean, that is the a huge question that and one of the one of the things that we try to look at when we formalized our plan. I think positioning it as an opportunity. I think we can, all of us on this call, we probably all know, as much as the next person of all of the news of, what you're hearing about where AI will take the job market, from very utopian scenarios to very dystopian scenarios. But I think we can all agree that, there is going to be this window. I think the argument is how long the window is, but there's going to be a substantial window where those that use the technology are going to have a huge advantage. And so when, from a standpoint of, at least in our company, I can't speak for everyone, but with our company, we see it as a big advantage of, not when we increase productivity, we are continuing to grow. Like Bryan said, he's in a market that's down 20%, so he's still up 20%. So he's in substantial growth. Normally, you would continue to hire, but because the productivity increases, we probably won't be hiring at the rate that we were. And what that means is those benefits, those productivity benefits will, yes, they will drop to the company, but they will also drop to the employees because those employees at the end of the day will be producing more revenue for in their positions and become that much more valuable. But I totally understand that it is a threat. And I think the only way to respond, or it can feel threatening, and the only way to respond to that is to, fully just, sink your teeth into these technologies.
Great answer, Bryan.
Yeah, if you're afraid that you're going to lose your job to AI, then you should start learning AI immediately, because prompts are not easy, right? Like everybody, I feel like by now everybody's using some sort of chat GPT or Gemini to help craft emails, right? That is basically baseline information that is, I mean, my parents are using it, right? So like if my parents are using it, then everybody already, it's familiar. There are so many other tools, and prompts can be very challenging, and knowing how to use AI is going to make you invaluable to your current employer or to your future employer if your current employer is going to be left in the dust by somebody with AI knowledge. So I do think that as a group of people that are obviously interested because you're here on this call, that to me that is the key component. And the truth is, some people will get left behind, and those people are going to get left behind because they don't have the skill. I actually think that we're going to hire more people and increase the productivity, which is going to increase the our bottom line. I mean, like I said, my goal was to increase the productivity of my staff from base level to higher functioning by 25%, and we're at a 20% growth on this year. I think there is some correlation to that information. If you're not, I'm no longer burdened by some of the things that I was burdened by a year ago because they're just happening in automations and through AI. And I can focus on growing the business. So I actually think there is significant growth opportunity with that. And also, like I've said before, if you're not using different AI tools, those businesses are going to disappear, right? And in 5 years, right now, everybody on this call has got an advantage, right? We're already talking about it. In 5 years, everybody else is going to be to where the level is where we are currently talking about, building out our own applications or automations or all of those different pieces are on the way. And if you're the person that knows it today, you're going to be way further advanced in your career than the people that are just starting to use ChatGPT today.
All right, message received, and it sounds like we need to do a whole nother webinar on that. The final question I will answer that I saw in the chat is, what's the playbook? And so let me put this up on the screen now. We promised you the playbook for 2026, and this is what we believe it is. So we've got to get away from some things and we got to get to some other things in order to be more anti-fragile in the face of macroeconomic volatility. We've got to move past just adopting technology to truly unlocking AI's value. We've got to move away from hiring models that are about hiring more people to really tapping into specialized skill sets like we heard from our guest today. And we've got to get away from really focusing on what worked before because it's not going to work tomorrow. We've got to embed innovation and experimentation in how we do things. And that's really how, as business leaders, we become anti-fragile in 2026. So I want to thank Bryan and Phil so much for joining us today. Before we close out, there's one final thing that I want us to do, and I want everyone on the call actually to do it as well and drop it in chat. Share one bold action that you plan to take in 2026 to move toward that new playbook. And I'll say, as a research leader, I'm going to seek 3 new ways to get our research out to market and in front of business leaders. Phil, what are you going to do in 2026 that's bold?
I think just continue to basically push, focus on every day moving forward in AI. And we our family, we have a 9-year old daughter, and my wife and myself and my daughter every night we have a little AI time after dinner, and we'll kind of just prompt one of the three models that we subscribe to. And I think as long as you're seeing that constant progress, that's gonna always at a minimum of once a day, even if you're not in it. Obviously, if you're in it all the time, do it. But if you're not in it on it for your job, just once a day, being in with AI is going to help you.
Love it. Bryan, what one bold thing are you doing in 2026?
Well, my business partner, if he's on the call, is going to kill me for me announcing this. And also my creative team that we've been working on this for a while. We're going to launch it in Q2. We're doing a brand fill buyback. And brand fill is the stuff you get that belongs in a landfill, frankly, right? That doesn't have a meaning behind it. It's a junky t-shirt or a Frisbee at an event. It has no tie-in. And one of the things that we've been working with is a brand fill buyback program where if you have stuff sitting in your office that has been sitting there because either you just don't like it, it doesn't resonate, you can send it back to us, which will be responsibly recycled or upcycled. This is the part that why I was waiting until Q2 to be announced, because we're working with some specialists to do that part of it. That part of what we are going to do is you send it to us, we'll take care of that part of it. And in the meantime, we'll have a conversation, what we call strategic swagging, where we can talk about why it didn't work and what are the ideas that we could go moving forward with it. And then if you want to go with something that we pitch to you, then we'll give you 25% off of your order because we got rid of some of this stuff that was not good. So if my business partner's on the call, I don't think he is, he will be very upset about it. But what I would say is, well, we're still trying to figure out the details on the upcycling piece of it. Anybody that's on this call, if they reach out to me and talk to me about this, we'll honor that now, right? I'll start taking that stuff in and get it out of your closet now and give you that 25% moving forward. So that's the big idea, and hopefully I don't get into too much trouble when I get off this. My Slack is not blowing up yet, so I think we're okay.
So cool. And thank you so much for sharing here. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us. Please make sure you check out the full report, reach out to us on LinkedIn with more questions, and let's get bold. Keep the conversation going. Thanks so much, everybody.